You're listening to Fox City's Murder and Mayhem, your bi-weekly dose of true crime history in a small rural community of Wisconsin.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Fox City's Murder and Mayhem. I'm Eric.
I'm Gavin.
Gavin, we are back again. We're traveling someplace. Where are we going today?
We're going to New York.
So now, 2 weeks ago, we're talking about how I hate how Eric makes us do these podcasts about the UP.
Yeah.
So Gavin gets even and says, let's go to New York.
Yeah. So I'm going to explain this. I am at this unusual place right now where I have like a backlog of Fox Cities episodes. You know, a year and a half ago, I don't even remember. We've been doing this so long. But at one point I was like, oh no, we might be running out. And now I've got like 8, maybe 9 like lined up.
Yeah, and if I recall right, when you first made that comment that, I think this is going to burn out pretty quick.
Yeah.
It wasn't very long, and you were like, oh, maybe it wasn't.
Yeah.
Like literally like 4 of them fell in your lap the next week or something, and you're like, okay, maybe we're good for a little while yet.
Yeah.
So
what I'm doing today is actually going to jump ahead of the list, just because I'm giving a talk next week, which by the time the listeners hear this will have already passed. But this year, 2026, is the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution.
Okay.
Which for history people, that's like a big deal.
Okay.
For somebody my age, it's kind of a big deal because I wasn't alive in 1976. I feel bad for everybody who was because you're old. But
wow.
No.
Okay.
No. That's rude. That's rude. But I missed it. I mean, not by much, but I missed it. And unless I make it into my 90s, I'm not going to be around for 2076. Okay. So we don't get the 200 and the 300. So the 250. That's like us. That's our celebration. Anyway, so I have a lot of pages in front of me. I'm not going to read a lot of this, but there are 2 Revolutionary War soldiers buried in Kaukauna. I'm going to talk about one of them. The other one kind of comes up a little bit as well.
Okay.
But I'm going to talk about one of them.
Okay.
So it's not Fox Cities as far as pretty much none of this story happens in the Fox Cities. But it's relevant.
Yes.
And I think it's good to get a story out. While we're supposed to be celebrating 1776, I think, us Fox Cities people, we can do that too. So
that's super cool, actually. I like this story.
Okay.
Already.
Yes. We like it. That's good. Okay, so the person I want to talk about is named Jacob Kankapot. If you are from Kaukauna, the name Kankapot might sound familiar to you.
There's a lovely creek in Kaukauna called the Kankapot Creek. Right?
There is. That is exactly right. So he is sort of a political leader among the Stockbridge Indians in the Massachusetts area. At this time, it's the Massachusetts colony because it's not quite, the U.S. yet. He's a political leader. His grandfather was a political leader. It's not exactly like you inherit it, but it's sort of. Then it comes to be the 1770s, and some of the people in the United States again, it's not even the U.S. yet. Some of the people in the American colonies are getting kind of like restless, and they want to fight back against the British, which they technically are also the British, but they want to fight back. People who live in Stockbridge, Massachusetts are authorized to start a group, a company or a regiment. They kind of got to do this from scratch because they don't have their own army.
Mm-hmm.
The man who does that is a man named William Goodrich, and William Goodrich lives among the Stockbridge Indians. He himself is not, but he lives among them. and he sort of gets them together and signs them up. And he gets a number of guys to sign up for an 8-month stint, which doesn't really sound like a long time, but it kind of is. Because again, like, there is not an official army at this point. Today, if you sign up for the army or what have you, you're going to get paid. And there's things that you're going to get rewarded for that. At this point in time, like, you could get paid. Like, they have money set aside for you, but it's not like a guarantee. You pretty much have to walk off your family farm and hope that someone's going to take care of that while you're going out to war. And keep in mind, like, during the Revolution, the Americans are kind of the bad guys. They can promise that they're going to pay you, but if they lose, you're not getting paid. You might get shot for treason.
So now, is there like a government that is the one that is paying these people, or is it more like you get a rich guy who has a bunch of money and says, I want to put together a militia and I'll pay the people to be in the militia?
So in this particular case, it's the Massachusetts Provincial Congress.
Okay.
And this was very hodgepodge. Each colony sort of had their own version of this. So there kind of was a national version because, like, George Washington's like the main military leader, but this was really colony by colony to kind of set this up.
Okay. I got maybe another dumb question, totally off topic of the subject, but so
Sure.
Now these like colony governments that you're talking about, so the whole revolution was all about taxes, not paying the British taxes, pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So are the people paying taxes to the British and to this colony thing? Or is it like this colony thing is collecting the taxes for the British and then they just stop paying the British?
I don't have a good answer to that.
Okay.
I don't believe that they're paying taxes to two different people, two different organizations. I don't believe that. So how the states are getting funded, I'm not sure. In theory, the state governments are supposed to be working for the British.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure how they're still funded once they break away. American Revolution is not my strong point, so not really sure. But yeah, it's kind of a weird thing because, again, like, we think of it today, we're like, all right, fight the British, independence, awesome, which it is. But at the time, they're kind of the bad guys. Like, today, if you try to overthrow the government,
it's not going to be looked upon very brightly.
Yeah, people don't normally like that. Like, if you succeed, then later on, like, oh, those guys were awesome. But if you fail, you get shot. Like, people don't love that. So, keep in mind, at any given time during the Revolution, like, the majority of Americans did not actually support this. But anyway, so he signs up for 8 months, and because they're in Massachusetts, he pretty much spends a good part of his time at a series of battles called the Siege of Boston. And the Siege of Boston, if you're into military campaigns and military history, which I am not, but if you are, pretty fascinating. So Boston today, it's on the ocean and whatever. But Boston back then was really on the ocean.
Okay.
Like, they've done some development to kind of fill in some of it since then. This is a bad way to describe it, but the city of Boston looks like a lollipop.
Okay.
So Boston is like on the lollipop, and then the stick is like a little stretch of land connecting it to the rest of Massachusetts.
Okay.
I'm pretty confident they've filled a lot of that in. I don't think it's quite that isolated anymore.
Okay.
But it's interesting. So the Americans are like, okay, there's a big naval presence in Boston, which is where the British are, and they're like, well, they can't leave. Like, they can bring the boats in and out, but they can't, anything they bring to Boston, they can't bring into the mainland without crossing this thin little stretch of land.
Okay.
So the Americans are like, we're just going to stop that.
Okay.
So this was like one of the big early battles. This is still 1775. So this isn't even 76 yet. And they're trying to cut off the British by blocking them from being able to bring anything that they bring to the docks into the colonies.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a long time, but they do succeed. And eventually the British move their main naval area up to Nova Scotia in Canada. So they do ultimately succeed. The Stockbridge Indians are widely celebrated for this. Jacob Kankapot is celebrated. The other guy who ends up in Kaukauna is celebrated even more. His name is Hendrik Appelmatt. Hendrik Appelmatt is a captain, and as the story goes, he received his captain's sword personally from George Washington. I've never been able to personally verify that, but he was a very well-known military man. His name does appear in letters written by George Washington. So Washington does know who he is.
Okay.
So whether he actually got handed the sword, I don't know, but they're aware of each other for sure. So now this problem happens where the Stockbridge come back from the Revolutionary War, and guess what? While they were out fighting, somebody took all their land.
What? This doesn't happen.
Yeah. So they come back, they go home, and like suddenly they find that like their land has been like snatched up by like their white neighbors, and they're like, "What the heck?" And they're like, "We thought you were our friends. Like, aren't we war heroes?" But apparently, people who lived in that area really wanted that land, so they started snatching it up. So much so that by 1780, so about 5 years after they start fighting, there's almost really nothing left that they own, and they're forced to have to move to New York from Massachusetts.
Okay.
And they have to move in with the Oneida, and the Oneida don't necessarily want them to move in with them, but they're like, well, I guess we like you better than the white people, so you can come live with us.
Wow. So I feel like we have touched on this story a little bit.
Maybe. Yeah.
In some other story, but okay.
Yeah, so that happens. I don't know what all battles Kankapot was in. I know, like I said, he was at the Siege of Boston, which includes the Battle of Bunker Hill, which, I don't entirely know what the Battle of Bunker Hill is, but it's one of those battles that you hear about.
Yeah.
I don't think he went on after that. The group he was in afterwards went on into Canada, and kind of like chased down some of the British that fled. I don't think he was part of that. But I kind of wish he was, because that group apparently was like just vicious. And this was both the Indians and the whites who went to Canada. So this is not, what I'm about to say is not racist. This was everybody in the group who did this. Apparently, once they chased them into Canada, they would eat the British's dogs.
Okay.
Like, as a terror campaign.
All right.
They would capture their dogs. Like, they didn't need to, but they would capture their dogs and eat them just to, like, be like, yeah, we're crazy. We're gonna come after you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So now, maybe we're coming to this, but this Kankapot guy, is the creek, obviously the creek in Kaukauna is named after him.
Yes.
Is it just because of the fact that he was in the Revolutionary War? Or are we going to get to something local that he does that gets him known for, that gets the creek named after him, I guess?
He is, famous is probably too strong a word, but he's known for his Revolutionary War service. That is not why the creek is named after him.
Okay, but are we going to get to that?
I'll mention it.
Okay, all right.
So they're in New York now with the Oneida, like I said, I'm just going to skim over a lot of this. He's a fairly well-known political leader. Among the Stockbridge, like the political families are the Kankapots, the Quinnies, and a family called the Chicks.
Okay.
And so he's kind of like negotiating with the Oneida. There's some record of the discussions among them and how they're kind of working things out. And they're friendly, but they don't really like each other. They're just kind of together. And there's a lot of split in general. Like, so the Oneida is part of this group called the Six Nations.
Okay.
And I'm not going to try to list them because I'm definitely going to forget one if I try. But it's 6 different Indian nations who are sort of allied. They have similar languages and things like that. And even that is it's sort of tense at this moment because one of them is the Mohawk.
Okay.
And the Mohawk sided with the British during the Revolutionary War. So although the Mohawk and the Oneida consider themselves like brothers, at this moment, it's not looking so good because they end up on opposite sides of the war.
Okay.
But anyway, so there's a whole lot of tension, like not just between the Indians and the whites, but among different Indians because this revolution's kind of splitting where they're siding with. Because they know, however this is going to come down, it's going to be better or worse for them depending on what side they're on. Anyway, so the Kankapot negotiates with them, kind of working out, are we going to share the land? Do we get separate land? If we get separate land, then basically the Oneida have to get rid of some of their land, which they don't want to do. Yeah.
In hindsight, 50-50, it doesn't matter because they're going to lose all that land anyway.
They are.
Eventually. So.
They are.
Sorry to say.
Yeah. So yeah, this goes on for some time. I'm not going to read this sheet, but somebody at these political discussions actually wrote down some of the speeches given. So, like I said, not going to read that. But they go back and forth. Ultimately, they come up with a list of agreements. They got an 8-point agreement. I'm not going to read it, but they work out a way that they can live together. But as you say, all this work of trying to work out the differences so they can live together in New York doesn't really work out because they end up, and this is probably where we talked about it. We probably talked about some Oneida story. I don't recall specifically why at this point, but there was a company in New York. I can't remember what it was called, something land company, and they were buying up the land and doing it in a very underhanded way. And sort of like the religious leader of the Oneida was a man named Samuel Kirkland. And Samuel Kirkland was not a nice guy.
Okay.
Like, he was nice to their faces, but on the back end, he was working closely with the land company.
Okay.
So it's really weird because, yeah, most of these.
So this is Samuel Kirkland, just based on his name. He's not a native. He's
not a native.
He's a very white guy.
He's a very white guy.
Okay.
And this is kind of seems to be the running thing. Like, among the Stockbridge, the religious leader there was a man named John Sargent, very white guy.
Okay.
So yeah, it's weird. Like, they like the religious leaders. They get along with the religious leaders. They respect the religious leaders. But it seems like when the religious leaders find themselves in a situation where they can find some advantage for themselves, they kind of don't care about their own group, their own congregation that much anymore. I don't want to speak too broadly about that because obviously there's nuance and everything. But especially in Kirkland's case, when he gets an opportunity to start selling out his own people, he's pretty quick about it.
So now, do they put these? Did like the British put these white people, religious people, in these tribes to try and spread that the religion to the natives? Is that kind of
depends what you mean by British people? I mean, not
like Sam Kirkland,
not in a political sense. Just, I mean, the same as any other. This is just how the religious thing, works. Is the missionaries go out and they convert people, and once they've converted people, they have to put. So it's these are people who are connected with some larger religious organization,
and they just go out and they talk to different tribes, and then the tribe is like, "Oh yeah, this sounds like a good thing," and then they become involved in it. Basically, okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like it was forced on them or anything.
It wasn't forced on them. No.
Okay.
And even today, I can't speak to the Stockbridge, but with the Oneida even today, they have a group. It's sort of a political group. There's a divide where they have both what's called the Christian Party and the Pagan Party.
Okay.
And Pagan Party is probably not a great name, but basically means the people who have tried really hard to keep the older traditions.
Right.
So, yeah, not everybody was super excited about this new group, but others were, because they felt, if we're going to become Americans, whether we want to or not, I guess we should probably take up their customs. Because, especially like the very East Coast, the Oneida somewhat, but the Stockbridge definitely, because the Stockbridge are like, is about as far east as you can go.
Mm-hmm.
Other than being tan, they're basically white people.
Okay.
Because, they've been completely surrounded by this for generations of, how this works with the British. So they operate in a very, they speak English. They're very, this happens, blah, blah, blah. They're working out their differences. Jacob Kankapot is a big part of negotiating this. The other big Stockbridge person involved is John Quinney. We're not going to talk about it, but the Quinney name also may be familiar to people. Finally, the last bit of land that Jacob Kankapot had in Massachusetts. He had one little last piece of land, and he sold it off in 1810 to a doctor because there really wasn't any other reason to go back to that place. That it was a certain tract of land lying in Stockbridge, bounded southerly on a highway, westerly by the Elijah Deming's land, northerly and easterly on land now owned by Thaddeus Pomeroy, it being land which Lucertia Nimem last lived in this town, and it contains 1/2 an acre. So, it's very formal. Like, they filled in out deeds and everything, but at this point, he's surrounded. If the names don't kind of hint at it, he's surrounded by white people at this point. The Stockbridge presence in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, is pretty much gone. All right. So now again they're getting kind of pushed out of New York because that's becoming a thing. So they form this delegation to go to Wisconsin, which at this point isn't even Wisconsin. It's still Michigan territory.
Okay.
But for our purposes, we're just going to say Wisconsin. So in July 1821, they get a group together of Oneida, Seneca, Stockbridge, and they go out to Wisconsin to try to see if they can get some kind of a deal here. Because clearly going from Massachusetts to New York was only a temporary measure. So going next to whatever, Pennsylvania or whatever, probably, or Ohio, probably not going to help. So really, they're like, we better really get out to the wilderness here if we don't want to get moved. So they go out and they're joined by a white military leader named Trollbridge. And Trollbridge, for our purposes, is great. What his personal deal is, I don't know, could have been a terrible guy. But for us, as historians, great, because he kept a journal through this whole thing.
Okay.
So we know what was going on. And I got to say, just as a side note, researching this has been a lot of fun for me because it's never been compiled in one place before. So it took a lot of digging on my part. But there's a lot out there. Mm-hmm. You just got to find it because there's military records, there's old journals, there's religious records. Like, all the pieces are out there. A lot of stuff has been preserved. It's just scattered all over because you got to find the people who wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been kind of fun seeing it come together and turn this guy who we pretty much just know as like the Creek guy into like an actual kind of person who went on these adventures and things. Anyway, so they leave from New York to go to Green Bay, because when you go by boat, you go to Green Bay. You go through the Great Lakes. Along with them is a missionary with the Oneida named Eliezer Williams. I don't know if we've talked about Eliezer Williams before.
The name does not ring a bell to me. So
I'm not really going to talk about him now. We might maybe in the future, if somebody really wants me to, we could do a thing on him. There's like entire books written about him. The guy was nuts. Like he's a religious leader for the Oneida, but he was nuts. He claimed that he was the son of the King of France.
Okay.
And he, as a child, fled France to avoid, France was in turmoil, like everywhere was in turmoil. So he fled, and he always claimed that he was like the lost son of the king. So he was like the rightful heir to the kingdom of France, which is just crap. It's not true. Like, long story short, it's not true. But guy made some weird claims. But anyway, so they're coming through the waters. They stop at Detroit. They stop at Mackinac Island. And they finally get to Green Bay. They reach Fort Howard. Fort Howard is already set up at this time in the 1820s. So Fort Howard is basically Green Bay today. Okay. I mean, it's not exactly on the same spot, but basically. And they work out negotiations with the Menominee there to see about how they can get land by the Menominee. And what happens is pretty wacky. So they go there and they meet up with the people who run Fort Howard, specifically Captain Whistler, who's like the head of Fort Howard. And they find the local, what at that time was called the Indian Factor. It was like the white guy who negotiated with the Indians in the area. Okay. His name was Irwin. And they get them and they meet with the Menominee to start these negotiations. And the Menominee seem willing. They're like, okay, yeah, like we'd be happy to help you guys come out here, set you up, and you can live with us. And that's all fine and good. And there didn't seem to be any real problems. But then all of a sudden, French guys show up.
Okay.
And the French guys start talking to the Menominee, and they're like, yeah, you don't want to do that. That's a really bad idea. And so then the Menominee come back to like the negotiating table, and they're like, yeah, we don't want to do that.
These French guys just told us it was a bad idea.
Yeah, these French guys told us it was a bad idea. We don't really want to do that. And it's funny because in the journal, they're mostly just called French guys. Okay. They're not really given names, except one guy is given a name.
Okay.
And his name is Mr. Greeno. And Mr. Greeno runs a sawmill at Kaukauna. So I know who he is.
And that's the guy that built the Greeno mansion?
That is his father.
It's his father.
That is his father. And yeah, so he apparently is telling the Menominee, like, no, you don't want these guys here. This is a bad idea. And like the people at Fort Howard are not happy about this. The people, the white guys on this boat with doing the negotiations are not happy. They're like, what's up with these French guys? And they're sort of bitter. Like so this is 1820, and in the War of 1812, which if you do the math is only a couple years earlier, in the War of 1812, the Americans were on one end of the battle, and the French guys were on the other end of the battle. Okay. So only a couple years earlier, these French guys like really did not like these Americans. So the Americans are thinking this is like a personal thing. They're like, oh, the French guys are just mad at us because we beat them in the war. I don't know if that's true, if that's the real reason.
Or were they just trying to keep being like, we don't want more natives here?
I don't think it's that, because the French in general got along really well with the natives. The French, I will give them credit because the French, although they are white guys, they didn't try to do the things that like the British and the Americans did. They were happy to live on the land, learn the customs, marry into families. They weren't trying to buy up, generally speaking, they weren't trying to buy up land and push people out. That wasn't their deal.
Mm-hmm.
So they were more cooperative than the British or Americans generally were.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, so after the French people leave, then the Menominee come back and they're like, okay, we do want to work with you. We just told you we didn't because the French guys were standing around and we didn't want them to hear that we didn't want you here. So they sign a thing saying, yes, you can come here. And there's, and the treaty is written, and the treaty is written in a vague way that will later on cause some real conflict. And that's the Menominee version of the story is they understood the treaty to be giving the Oneida and Stockbridge the rights to settle on the land and enjoy the land as long as they don't, over farm and overfish and that sort of thing. The Stockbridge and the Oneida understood it to be a deed where they were given the land, which was, a very different idea than what the Menominee claim they understood it to be.
So they're only because at this point in time, Menominee probably controls like almost all of the state of Wisconsin.
They
right?
control a large part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So are they just giving them a specific chunk of the land? Or was it just like the agreement was all Menominee land was there?
No, it's actually mapped out. It's land along the Fox River between Kaukauna and Oshkosh.
Okay.
And so that's mapped out. There's very specific areas of where they're supposed to be, which does end up basically being the case. That is where the Stockbridge do settle. The Oneida work out an agreement later on, which is why the Oneida Reservation is a little farther north. But it is basically established. But again, the difference is like the Menominee had a different concept of like land ownership because no individual person in the Menominee owned like an acre of land.
But the Oneida were used to that because they had been in New York and they had been around that.
To the Oneida and the Stockbridge, like if you own the land, you own the land.
Right.
So they had a different concept of what land ownership meant, which would cause conflict later on. But anyway, the treaty was signed. So then 1821, 1822, the Stockbridge and Oneida come over to Wisconsin. Now, my thought, like I said, the French, from the point of view of the guy writing the journal, he thinks the French are bitter because they lost the War of 1812, so they don't like the Americans. There's probably some truth to that. But I want to be a little more sympathetic, and I think it might be that the French were truly trying to warn the Menominee that, like, you don't understand the terms of this agreement.
Oh, okay.
Like if you sign this, like, you're not, like, letting them, like, sleep in a spare bedroom. You're giving them the house.
Yeah.
So, I think because the French understood, like, they knew how that worked. So I think they might have actually been, and traditionally, if you look at how this worked, the French sided with the Menominee consistently in trying to preserve the old ways. And part of it was for selfish reasons because a lot of them were in the fur trade and the fur trade was going to die if civilization reached that far. So there was definitely selfish reasons too, but I think they truly like did not want the area to be built up.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so they come out, the Stockbridge settle in what today is the south side of Kaukauna. They call it Statesburg. And Kankapot, Jacob Kankapot, builds a sawmill on the south side of the Fox River. not actually on the river, but on the creek.
Nice.
So it becomes known as Kankapot's Creek. He operates the sawmill there for a while.
Do you know the actual, I'm just curious, the actual location of the sawmill?
We think we do.
Well, so like, where would it be? Is there like a landmark that you could say in Kaukauna that would point to where, right around where it is?
No, I have been told that it's kind of, there's not a landmark exactly, but kind of like at the end of like 9th or 10th Street, overlooking the creek.
Okay,
Would kind of
I
like
can
be
see
the area.
Okay, I can see where you're saying.
Yeah.
I think.
Now I don't know exactly how this has been determined. I've heard people say they knew exactly where Captain Hendrik Appelmott's house was, and like there's no way.
There's no possible way to.
I have no idea how they could determine that. So, a little suspicious of some of these claims. The sawmill claim is less suspicious because a sawmill would actually appear on diagrams.
Okay.
Okay, so for people not familiar, when the Stockbridge came, one of the things they're known for today is Electa Quinney, who you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
She was one of the Stockbridge who came, and she's known as the first school teacher in Wisconsin. Like, we know where that schoolhouse was because on the early diagrams, buildings like that, like a schoolhouse and a church and things like that, they are on the map.
Okay.
So we do know where those were. We don't know where individuals lived. So that part's a little fishy. But I do think the sawmill, we can generally get an idea of where it was. Yeah, okay. So he established a sawmill. Apparently, he died in 1835. And he bled to death as a result of an accident, sometimes called a sawmill accident, and sometimes it says that he was out cutting down timber and the timber fell on him. The actual truth of the matter, I don't know. The records are really scant. This is sort of the thing. Like, once the Stockbridge get to Kaukauna, pretty much our only records are relying on the journals kept by the religious leaders.
Okay.
Because there's no newspapers anywhere in the state of Wisconsin yet. So like there's like if even though he was an important political leader, once he dies, there's not a newspaper that's going to report it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. He was buried in the old Stockbridge Indian Cemetery, which unfortunately today
doesn't exist anymore.
Doesn't really exist. We know where it was. We know that it's possible people are still there, but they built on top of it. So, yeah, that's fun.
I mean, they didn't. In hindsight of it all, they didn't know any better. They should have known better, but they didn't know any better, right?
They did not know any better, and I don't know why, because it's not like they didn't know where it was, but they still did it.
But it was, I think, the perception of what Native Americans were back then, that it didn't matter if you disturbed their dead.
I think that may be part of it, but it's really weird because this wasn't. Again, I'm gonna be careful how I say this. Like, it's not okay to dig up Indian burial sites. Like, that's not okay. But I kind of understand, like, old archaeologists going and digging up mounds to see what's in them. It's not right, but I get it.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't like that. Like, this was an actual cemetery with markers. So this wasn't like, oh, we don't know who's out there. These are ancient people. Like, no, like, they actually put
they did
crosses on the graves.
So this was clearly not a mistake. They clearly went in and just built over the top of a graveyard.
They knew it was a cemetery, yeah.
Yeah, that is pretty awful.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm still at this point hoping to find more information out. This is like a super broad version, but I love that we have local connections to the Revolutionary War because that's sort of like the thing is like we're celebrating 1776 and I get that we should, but it's kind of weird like when you celebrate it and you live in Wisconsin, or if you live anywhere really, west of the East Coast, because like Wisconsin didn't give a crap. Anybody who lived in Wisconsin in 1776 gave no craps about what was going on the East Coast. They probably didn't know half of what was going on, because how would they?
Right, exactly.
So it's really weird. So we do have that connection because people came here after the fact. Mm-hmm. But if it weren't for that, like, there'd really be no reason for Wisconsin to care.
Yeah, really, it's extremely bizarre, right? That somebody in Wisconsin actually fought in the Revolutionary War.
I mean, there's several.
But
Kaukauna's got 2, but there are others in the state.
Yeah, but I mean, couldn't be a huge amount, because it's just, first of all, how many people were in Wisconsin at that point in time?
Right.
And then, like you said, it's quite a ways away from a lot of it. So
yeah, we're kind of lucky. We got 2 guys in Kaukauna. The reason they're there isn't really good. They weren't there because they want to be there, but it does give us the opportunity to kind of turn it around and sort of celebrate these guys who got a bit. They were American heroes, and then they got a crap deal out of it. So.
Yeah, just try to envision in your head. You go off to war for how many years, and then come back, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we took your land, by the way."
Yeah, I don't know exactly. Like I said, he only signed up for 8 months originally, but I don't know if he signed up after that. I'm not entirely sure. I will. They did keep records. There are Revolutionary War records, but they're not like the best records, because again, this is not super official. You're signing up for a militia that is technically, not
sanctioned,
not authorized by your government leaders. So
takes balls, man.
It does. It really does. But yeah, that's what I love. I love thinking about that in the reverse, because we're just always trained. Train's not the right word, but we're always, we're like, oh, George Washington, American hero, blah, 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 which again, he is. But had he lost that war,
he would not be a very popular guy, probably.
No, we'd be British, and we'd be talking about, hey, remember that time we had a civil war in the 1770s, and that George Washington jerk tried to overthrow the country? So it's like,
it's very fair.
We love him because he won, but if he would have lost, we would still look back at him as like this great traitor to the country.
Absolutely. The thing I find interesting about this story too, because we have talked about like that Oneida moving from New York to Green Bay.
Yeah.
But I don't think we ever talked about the fact that I would have assumed they just slowly got pushed this way. And it sounds like, no, they just made the decision, let's get as far away from here as possible so that we don't have to deal with getting bumped and
basically
bumped.
There was one more step in there in between. They were supposed to move to land in Indiana at some place called White River. And I don't know how that agreement came about. I don't remember. But when they went to go check out the land at White River, like, it had already been taken. so like, people were like, "Oh, well, you can have land here," and they're like, "Okay, that's great." And then they go out and they send like a guy out to see what's going on there, and they're like, "Oh no, I guess we can't go here." So there was a temporary like other plan. But I don't think too many people actually moved to Indiana because they found out pretty quickly that wasn't going to work.
They just had to go back and renegotiate again. God, what a mess, man.
Yeah.
So
it's all messy, and I don't fully get it. I get it. Like, once you get farther west, I get it, and it's not right. I'm not justifying it. But I get that the cultures are so radically different that the American point of view is it's easier to fight them or push them away than work with them.
Mm-hmm.
But with the Stockbridge and the Oneida, who are, again, they speak English. They own land. Like, they understand how the system works.
And it seemed
how hard is it to just let them live in your city?
Yeah, and it seems like they did legitimately, like, I mean, they kind of turned more Americanized per se.
They did.
So it's not like they're fighting you. They're adopting your cultures, and I mean, this shouldn't have been a problem.
Yeah, I don't want to over speak it because I'm by no means an expert on Oneida or Stockbridge culture, but that is my understanding, is that the Stockbridge were very assimilated at this point. Like, they still had a Stockbridge language, but they primarily spoke English. Mm-hmm. Like, they were really, like, I refer to them as just tan Americans. Like, they did everything the exact same way. They didn't wear, like, different clothes. So it's so weird to me how poorly they were treated, despite the fact that they were like, well, obviously we can ask them to fight for us in the war. But then after the fact, now your use to us is over. We don't care anymore.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of probably how it works.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm looking at this, 250 years later, so it's a very different world, but it's so bizarre to me.
Yeah, 100%. So, all right, you got anything else for this one, or are we ready to wrap her up?
No, I like I said, I was kind of skimming it because you don't need to know all the details of all the negotiations and all that, but that'll be online sooner or later. And probably by the time people hear this.
And the presentation you're doing at the library, is that covering both guys, or did we get like a condensed version of your library?
I'm just doing Kankapot. I've done Hendrik Apamat in the past.
Okay.
And I will say that you would think that having done that would have given me a big head start, and it did a little bit. But I was surprised how much stuff I found that was just Kankapot specific and not Apamat. So I have been thinking that after next week, once I do this, I'd like to kind of combine these two together into one story, because like this printout right here is 17 pages. Mm-hmm. I could easily get 25, 30 pages, if I combine them. Mm-hmm. Wow. So I think that there's a really good story here. What I would do with it, I don't know, but I think you could actually make a really good story just talking about these two guys.
Interesting. Cool. All right. So then with that, we can wrap this episode up. We want to thank everybody for their continued support of the podcast. We will be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Do you have an idea of what the next one's going to be, Gavin, or is it kind of up in the air right now?
It depends which one I pick, because there's a handful that are ready to go.
All right, so we're just going to leave you in suspense till next time. So
I kind of want to do... No, actually, I'll tell you. It's most likely going to be kind of our follow-up to the Irish sax jingle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
That one's probably going to be the next one.
All right, so you got that. And we will be back in 2 weeks with that episode. And we want to thank everybody again for their continued support of the podcast. And we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to Fox City's Murder and Mayhem. Join us in 2 weeks for another exciting episode of Murder and Mayhem.